Now back to the show. This is AM 650's The Law Show.
Nice to have you with us. Andrew Aguilar and Ryan Black are lawyers with Macmillan LLP in Vancouver. They're with us today to talk about the new anti-spam law, which comes into effect very soon, July 1st, this summer, across Canada. And we're talking about all the implications of electronic advertising and all the rest of it. The government, it's their law after all, and Andrew, they have a website up and running now where individuals and or businesses can go and learn about this in advance of its implementation.
Yeah, it's actually quite a helpful website called fightspam.gc.ca, and if you go on there, it'll give you links to all of the Act and all the various parts. It'll give you frequently asked questions, tips, a PowerPoint presentation that Industry Canada did when they were touring around the country. So if you have some questions, that's probably a very good place to start.
Yeah. Okay. And Ryan, back to my point with Andrew in the last segment about this whole chicken and the egg business, because according to the Act, the new law, they're not any company, any advertiser is not going to be allowed to send you an advertisement unless you give them permission to do so.
Well, there's that, and or if you've entered in some sort of transaction with them where it's implied that they would be able to email you, that's kind of the basis. You have to have some reason to email someone, some legitimate reason before you are allowed to. And so it is a bit of a chicken and egg. If you're just cold emailing someone, you have to have an actual connection to start that process off with. If you don't, you shouldn't be sending that email.
Oh, so because it's okay for salespeople to go out into neighborhoods and literally cold call by knocking on people's doors and selling, I don't know, brushes or vacuum cleaners.
Right.
And this is the equivalent of that. It's a cold call, isn't it?
It's just so much more commercially easy to do that, for $20, someone can go out and buy 100 million email addresses and send out a bunch of emails and then, hire a bunch of computers in another country to send them. I guess the government just views it as economically different than door-to-door knocking. If you're door-to-door knocking, you're getting a low response rate and you're spending a lot of money to do it. So I think maybe that's the rationale.
But the beauty of that is at least when the guy is standing in front of your face going, "You want to buy a vacuum cleaner?" No!
Yeah.
Bang! You get to close the door and send him on his merry way. There's no satisfaction in this electronic stuff.
Well, I think the satisfaction here is for people, in 3 years are going to say, "I'll be able to sue you."
Yeah.
Okay. We just have to be cool.
You just have to be patient, I think.
You have to be patient and hold on to those emails.
Yeah.
Talk to us, Andrew, about the categories that this whole act encompasses.
Sure, and we talk about it as Canada's anti-spam law, but it does incorporate a number of other things as well. It applies to prohibiting sending what they're called commercial electronic messages, which is the email type provisions.
Okay.
It also applies to having false or misleading electronic messages in either the content or the subject line or something like that, which is it's for individuals. So if the subject line can't be misleading and the body can't be misleading and the body can't clarify what it says in the subject line. So the emails you get that say, you've won a prize,
right,
and then under it goes, you can enter to win a prize,
right,
are now going to be prohibited under this false and misleading.
Okay.
And then there's also for installing computer software, which has nothing to do with spam really, but we're talking about electronic commerce. I guess that's an element that got looped in here, and no one else in the world really seems to do that. And then for altering transmission data, which is more technical methods where people would use to
intercept messages and alter where they're going to go. Like if I think I'm sending a message to someone, but there's someone sitting in the middle trying to intercept that and send it somewhere else, that's now illegal. I think it was probably already illegal under the criminal code, but
right. You were talking, you both referred to very casually how advertisers get a hold of our addresses and our email addresses. This is why and our personal information is widely sold and bought on the internet and in that world on a daily basis, isn't it, Andrew?
Absolutely. I think, people have been collecting these lists. People have been collecting these often for the purpose of selling them. And then also, in the modern computer era, companies can use computers to do things like dictionary attacks or address harvesting.
What's a dictionary attack?
It's more of a computer program where they can just use common words and combinations of words.
Figure out what your password is.
Oh.
But to figure out email addresses, there's probably, there's Andrew Aguilar, there's probably Andrew Aguilar 1 on Gmail, and these programs can go through all of those iterations of it and send messages to everyone without even collecting addresses from people.
Ah, okay. Now, how does the government intend to intercept that practice or stop that practice altogether?
Well, they did prohibit email harvesting in this act, so they have taken some steps to do that.
Okay, something else I wanted to ask you about. It's maybe not completely on topic, but it's something that makes a lot of us worried, and it's the whole matter of Wi-Fi. And it's becoming more and more popular. Coffee shops and restaurants and shopping malls and public parks. They're talking about it in the city of Vancouver. Come on down to Stanley Park and bring your laptop, because we'll have Wi-Fi for you. My understanding, and I may be wrong, and I'd appreciate a correction if I am, my understanding is that if you are anywhere in public and your device is on Wi-Fi, you're under surveillance. Well, you're probably on video camera because you're out in the public anyway, but that activity that you're now conducting using the free, in quotes, Wi-Fi, all of that information is available to someone at will.
It's computers don't communicate that much differently than we are over the radio right now.
Okay.
And so if we were having a conversation in a public place and you were very far away and I was yelling at you, everyone else in that public place could hear it as well.
Okay.
And computers really aren't that different. If you're on some sort of a secure or encrypted connection, maybe they are. But most public connections aren't secure or encrypted, and most website communications aren't secure.
Although the flip side, I guess, of that is when you're in these public Wi-Fi areas and you're just accessing a computer, you're a lot more anonymous than you would be if you were at home using your home computer. In my practice, I identify anonymous posters on the internet all of the time, and if they're at home, I can usually track that email address back to their Shaw or TELUS or whatever account and be able to identify them. But if they're just using an open Wi-Fi at public library or something like that and they haven't logged in, they're a lot more anonymous and hard to track.
Ah, okay. But then those who are mining for information aren't really interested in their personal stuff as much as their consumption habits, right?
Sure. Or if you're on one of those connections and you log into something, someone can be seeing that you're logging into that website and possibly even see what your login credentials are.
And one of the funny things, I think, turning it back to Castle on that is when you go to a
Castle,
website,
by the way, is Canada's anti-spam law.
That's right.
And I apologize for my jargon.
No, that's okay. It's okay. We're still all getting used to it.
But when you go to a website and you get those kind of creepy advertisements that know that you've been searching for a new raincoat for the last couple days or a new barbecue or something and send you nothing but barbecue ads.
That is creepy.
That isn't caught within this because that's sent to an IP address as opposed to sent to an electronic address. So it's sent to a website and published generally on a website, not sent to you directly. So it's generally going to be exempted. So that's not going to stop. Although that's something that people might turn their mind to when they think, oh, at least with this new anti-spam law, I won't be tracked by advertisers or something.
And
like
I was hoping about pop-ups. I find pop-up ads incredibly annoying. So we're sitting here in the studio. Dwayne Bishop, our producer, pulls the Government of Canada, the fightspam.gc.ca website up on the big screen here in the studio. Ryan and Andrew and I are looking at it. And the first thing that happens when you get to this website is a pop-up ad for crying out loud. So you get the feeling, Ryan, the new anti-spam law is going to do absolutely zip about pop-ups.
Well, I'm pretty sure in 2004 pop-ups weren't an issue, and the reality is that technology moves a lot faster. Pop-ups are like ubiquitous on websites now.
They sure are.
And they were not when the law was being written. And I don't know that they even considered that spam. Although I think a lot of people, when people consider spam generally just the annoying things that come from the internet, I think that's a more colloquial definition of what spam is.
Absolutely.
You can be spammed on a website by a pop-up ad or by windows that pop up all the time. You can be spammed in your email box, on your cell phone. People think of spam as that sort of thing.
Right.
And this definition, despite including every commercial electronic message in Canada, may not include those technology-specific definitions.
Okay, now it's probable that once the act takes place, we'll all be given a certain grace period. That's usually the procedure. The act is proclaimed. Okay, Canada, the landscape has now changed. Educate yourselves. We'll give you a few months to get up to speed, and then full enforcement kicks in. Is that likely to be the case here, given the wide-ranging scope of the law?
Well, it's a little bit of an open issue. They've designed it that way. So for the first 3 years, only the CRTC can enforce it. And, they're going to be keeping in mind the fact that this is a new act and trying to take into account people who are actively trying to comply with the act and focus on the bad guys. But, in 3 years, there's supposed to be this private right of action, so people will have figured out how the act works, and then they can sue under it. However, the way the act's currently drafted, there's a chance that in 3 years, people could sue for bad behavior that happened after July 1st.
Oh, so if you've got a real beef, gather the evidence and keep it safely tucked
That's
away.
right.
And line up come July 1st, 2017 at the courthouse, and you'll be ready to go.
Is there likely, though, to be a splashy, high-profile test bust of some kind between now and 2017 when our turn comes up?
I think so. I mean, the CRT is not going to do nothing, and the easiest cases will be the very clear and egregious spammers. And if they're within Canadian borders or within the CRTC's reach somehow, those are the people that the CRTC is very likely going to go after.
Yeah, because
they might send warning letters to mom and pop shops. I don't know that they won't.
Right.
But I think the real enforcement will come against bad people.
And the CRTC's talked about having a wide array of things that they're going to work on.
Okay.
And part of it is going to be public education, and they've talked about that as being a big thing. And then they've got warning letters, and they can have an undertaking, and they can deal with businesses to try to, have penalties that are less than $1 million or $10 million. And I think that's what they're going to work on. But, I expect that they will have some against some big spammers, some of the bigger penalties to show that the act has some teeth.
Right.
But then we'll also see what happens with the courts, because there's a lot of questions in the act right now. There's a lot of ambiguity. It applies to an incredibly broad array of things. And I'm sure that this is going to change dramatically in the next 3 years over how courts interpret it and what happens going forward.
Ryan, when we go, in many consumer cases, we go out to buy something at a department store or whatever, and at the checkout stand, we're paying the dough and doing the debit card or whatever, and the clerk, for some mysterious reason, wants our email address and our phone number and all of this kind of stuff. All we've done is purchase a product. We've been able to pay for it. There are no financial issues here. Right. Are we required under any conditions to submit that information?
You may be required by the terms of whatever that store is. They made we're not going to sell to you unless you send us an email address. That seems like a really silly business decision to make. But there's nothing in law that would do that. And actually, if they want to collect that information under this new law, if they want to collect that email address for the purpose of sending you messages, they should be telling you why they're collecting the email address, and they should be doing it in a way that complies with the act.
And they're going to have to get your email address or something. It can't be a part of a term and condition when you're signing a contract buried in the middle. They have to be quite clear with you that they're collecting your information, and they're collecting it for the purpose of sending you commercial electronic messages, or it's not going to be valid.
Okay, so now if for some reason you are in a commercial situation and you buy something and someone other your email address is included in the transaction, perhaps you weren't paying attention or it just got included somehow, and you start to receive advertising information from that merchant. How do I break the pattern right away? How do I get out in front of this big time and early and turn it off?
Well, I think, the thing under this act is it's supposed to make it easy for you to get to unsubscribe. They're going to have a clearly and prominently displayed unsubscribe message, and if you click on it, it should, within 10 days, they're going to have to stop sending you messages.
Okay.
The one, I guess, tweak that you have to be aware of is if you're doing business with someone, that's going to give them implied consent to send you messages. And even if you unsubscribe the first time, if you do business with them again, they might get another implied consent and can send you another message.
See, this is why we have the Law Show on the radio, because this is a whole really gray area, this whole business, Ryan, of implied consent. The merchant says, well, he came in and bought some stuff from me, and we shook hands, and I took his money, and that's a business transaction. So obviously he's going to want to hear from me when I've got my next big sale coming up.
That's right.
Is that implied consent?
It absolutely is. When you purchase
get
something,
out of here.
Yeah,
Really?
No, when you purchase,
man.
That's right. It's frustrating because this is the sort of thing that people do think of as spam, right? Like I bought something and now this guy's emailing me every day about something. I mean, there is going to be a very clear unsubscribe, which should hopefully stop the flow. But the idea was that for a very limited period of time, 2 years, after you purchase something from someone, they will be able to email you anything that kind of arises out of that relationship.
Because you were in their store once and dropped a few bucks, you have given them permission for 2 years to bug you.
Unless they opt out. So that's it. The onus is going to be on you in those cases to opt out and say, I don't want to receive any more of these messages from people.
Okay.
Right. It's a little bit counterintuitive, and you're talking about it's a very gray area, and I completely agree. And one of the interesting things that we're struggling with when we're trying to interpret this law is that every time we're sending a commercial email now, any commercial email with any purpose that has a commercial, if you're trying to encourage someone to buy something from you or just hey, would you like to do coffee? I'd like to talk about doing business.
Right, sure.
Anything with a commercial purpose, we now have to go through this process of figuring out which exemption applies. Do I have consent or not? Do I have a relationship that I can rely on to send this message? Did this person give me his email address and I'm emailing him about his work? There's a whole list of things because, like I said at the top of the show, the law starts out with don't email unless. And then there's a big list of unlesses.
Okay.
And so we have to figure out for all these messages which unless applies.
Right. And so for us, the Canadian consumer, Andrew, we have a couple of months to do some pretty intense homework to figure out what those unlesses are as well, to be able to take advantage of them post July 1.
Right. Well, for people who want to send out messages, they're going to have to create a plan and consider how they're going to qualify people. The act is designed so that businesses are going to try to get your express consent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the thinking behind the act is that we have limited time periods. We want to get express consent. That's the only way you can get it. And let's try to get everyone to try to collect express consent. The one thing that I guess is different is that we know now from studies and things in the United States and various places around the world that very few people say, oh, yes, I'd love to continue to receive further emails from you. They
Right.
might be like just very, very small proportions.
Beat me again.
Yeah.
So, businesses might just be tracking these purchases and just keeping better records
Right.
so they can continue sending you messages for those 2-year periods and not really worry about getting the express consent because they know they're just not going to get it.
Right, okay. We're talking about Canada's new anti-spam law, referred to by some members of the legal profession as CASL, effective July 1, 2014. Our guests are Ryan Black and Andrew Aguilar, lawyers both from Macmillan LLP in Vancouver, online at macmillan.ca. We're back with more of The Law Show after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.